When Henry Hill entered witness protection, he was constantly worried that the greatly feared gangster Jimmy Burke would track him down. Let's check it out. I'm James Gladwish and welcome to OC Shorts, bringing you detailed historical snapshots of the American Mafia and other organised crime. Feel free to subscribe if you like that sort of thing. Today, we're going to take a quick look at Lucchese associate Henry Hill's time in witness protection. In 1985, the book Wise Guy by Nicholas Pileggi was released. Pileggi had sat down with former Lucchese family associate turned government witness Henry Hill and documented his life growing up amongst the American Mafia. The book was made into the movie Goodfellas, directed by Martin Scorsese. Both the book and the film end with Henry Hill entering witness protection. But what was Henry Hill's life like living under a new name under government protection? In 2004, the book Gangsters and Goodfellas was published. It was written by Henry Hill alongside Gus Russo, the author of the excellent book The Outfit. Gangsters and Goodfellas covers some further details of Henry Hill's criminal career, but also what his life was like living in witness protection, and how he feared reprisals from the likes of Jimmy Burke. So, let's check out a few sections of the book Gangsters and Goodfellas, where Hill talks about his new life in witness protection. One of Henry Hill's and his family's first locations in witness protection was Nebraska. In Nebraska, I wasn't really there for the family. Before my bag was unpacked, they had me back in New York for more debriefing. Even when I wasn't in New York, I was constantly on the phone with the feds and the attorneys. So I was still in constant action, but a different type of action. And when I wasn't doing that, I was drinking a quart of Stolies a day because I couldn't live with myself when I thought of the situation we were in. I went through a god-awful process. I also spent a lot of time at the local bar and met a couple of guys and played tennis with them. I made friends pretty quickly since I'm a pretty talkative guy. I hadn't changed all that much, still hyper. I always hit the ground running. What else was I gonna do? Sit home and look at my wife and kids? I needed an outlet too. So that made it even rougher on Karen and the kids. It created so much stress in the family for the first few months. Meanwhile, the marshals told me to invent some type of cover, whatever that meant. They told me I needed a fake career to tell my new friends. So I told my neighbours and the people I met right away that I was an insurance investigator. To explain why I was out of town, probably 3 weeks out of the month. I figured it was the home of the insurance people, Mutual of Omaha. So I said I was an arson investigator. I knew a little bit about it since I torched probably about half dozen places in my time. It was one of my areas of expertise. Philly Basile, for instance, owned a big nightclub out in Oceanside, Long Island, and he had leased the place out. It took off like you wouldn't believe. So then he wanted the place back, and the only way he could do that was if the tenants broke the lease, which they weren't about to do. So Philly asked me to torch the joint, either for the insurance, or at least to chase out the current tenants. So I did it. So this was my cover, and I made friends with local insurance guys. Hi, I'm Peter Haynes, insurance investigator. It was nuts. Henry Hill famously had problems with drugs, and this didn't change when he was in witness protection. Although most things in my life had changed, some things remained the same. I was still a substance abuser, a problem I will have to fight for the rest of my life. In Nebraska, I quickly located an unlikely source to feed my habit. I lived right near an Air Force base, and I was walking down the road one day and found a couple of joints that one of these Air Force guys had thrown out his car window. On another walk, I learned that marijuana, or hemp, grows wild in Nebraska. At least it did in those days. It grew on the medians of the parkway, and I would go and pick it. But it was like ragweed. You had to smoke an entire cigar to get a little buzz. After I found those Air Force doobies and hemp patches, I started walking that highway every day. My neighbours and insurance buddies thought I was on a fitness walk. Yeah, right. When I would go to New York, I'd take along a sandwich bag full of marijuana and hide it in the ceiling of the hotel room in the conference building where I stayed. But they started messing with me and changed my room around. They had like a dozen rooms. I tell them, I want this room, I like that one, I'm comfortable. It has nice pictures on the wall. The walls were like murals, and each one was a different scene. One was a snow scene, another was a seaside thing. But I could care less. I just wanted to be in the room where I'd hidden my stash. James "Jimmy the Gent" Burke, one of the mobsters that Henry Hill turned informant on, was still intent on tracking down Hill, even under government protection. Not too long after the 1981 tornado, witness protection called and told us to pack our bags and get ready to move. The head marshal said, "We'll be there in half an hour. Pack enough for 3 or 4 days. We'll explain later." We had no choice. They had hinted that something like this might happen, and we'd have to be ready to drop everything and leave. Now they were actually ordering us to do it. I hung up the phone, and they were already outside. They never took any chances. Part of the reason that they were so worried was not because of my well-being, but because we'd been working so hard preparing for the upcoming trials. They knew if I got whacked, then all that hard work would have gone up in smoke. We ran around like scared rabbits, getting together whatever we could carry. By the end of the day, we were packed into the marshal's car and speeding off into the unknown. We got out of Omaha in the blink of an eye. What the hell was going on? The feds transported us to a safe house, which is really just another word for a place where they can watch over us for a short time. There wasn't a whole lot safe about it. The safe house was a lodge like a Regency suite, miles away from Omaha. It wasn't much, but it had a small kitchen. That was the only thing worth mentioning about the place. We'd been at so many of them before and after that. We were all really highly strung, anxious about Jimmy, and more importantly, where we would be shipped off to. The tension was killing us because we were pretty vulnerable. Anyone could have spotted us, so we had to stay inside. Safe house my ass. Our first stop on our way to the airport was the marshal's headquarters. That's where we got the bad news. Jimmy Burke, possibly the most cold-blooded of all my former gangster colleagues, was overheard saying while being transported to a court or prison, "We know that rat bastard Hill's somewhere in the Midwest." You don't have to use your imagination much to assume he was a little more explicit than calling me a rat bastard. But I knew Jimmy and that he'd stop at nothing to have me, and maybe even my family, in an unmarked grave. It was a chance that neither the feds nor I were willing to take. Jimmy's reach was virtually limitless, and who knows what might have happened had we stayed there another night. Once again, I had to tip my hat to the marshals. Their timing was impeccable, like clockwork. In witness protection, they were almost unrealistically fast. Who knows how close Burke was to finding us? They kept in mind that Jimmy had snitches everywhere, and I wouldn't put it past him to have a guy on the inside of the program. There was even a rumour that someone in jail heard Jimmy say, "The fuckers in Nebraska." So I naturally worried that one of the feds was on the take. That was one of Jimmy's specialties. Looking back now, I don't believe he could have ever infiltrated those guys. But back then, I would have believed anything about Jimmy Burke. But the feds were quite sure that he knew where I was, and he had good PIs and good this and good that. I hope you enjoyed that book extract. Thanks for watching.